everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Ranju Roy here, and he is going to be continuing our conversation on Embodying the Yoga Sutras, which is a book that he and David Charlton wrote. So it's Embodying the Yoga Sutras, Support, Direction, and Space. And so in the previous segment, we were talking about Klehsa and Klehsa, which are ways in which we move towards or away from suffering, and that you're saying that the primary root of our suffering is that we misunderstand who we are. And that I had asked, like, well, what's, and then instead of, we get misidentified with the roles and thoughts that we have in different places. So like we were maybe talking about, if you could use as an example, COVID. And so we're watching tons of news. And the message that I get is that I'm out of control. I'm a victim. I'm out of control. And I'm imprisoned in my house. So those are some toxic psychological states: a state of not having freedom, a state of, and a series of desires and aversions that I have related to that. And then also a state of, so freedom, and then also feeling out of control and a victim. So I'm wondering if you can offer some insights in terms of maybe your own, what, maybe people that you've worked with, or what you've discovered yourself in this time period, how we can actually move from those psychological states and reduce them so that they're manageable.
Mm, mm. The starting point is what, and it works for me. It's what Patañjali presented is a thing called Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga. So many people who are into yoga have heard of the 8 limbs of yoga, Ashtanga yoga. That's quite not the asana, not the kind of style of yoga, the jumping style, but Patanjali had this thing called the 8 limbs of yoga, and he had 8 different arenas of practice. But what people don't know so much is that before going to the 8 limbs, he suggested this thing called Kriya Yoga, and Kriya Yoga has 3 limbs. And these 3 limbs are for people who are in high states of toxic emotion, or toxic, what we could call Klehsa.
Okay.
High states of Klehsa. And he's presenting these 3 limbs for anybody who just needs to get their mind under control a bit. I mean, under control sounds bad, but, to reduce the levels of toxicity. The 3 limbs are really simple. They're called Tapas, Tapas, and that's not a Spanish.
Yes, not a Spanish appetizer.
It is not a Spanish appetizer. Tapas, Swadhyaya, and Ishwara Pranidhana. I'll tell you a little bit about each of those things. So the first place to start is tapas. Tapas literally means a practice which heats and purifies. And I like to think of tapas, one of my teachers described tapas as going against your grain. It's doing something which you find challenging. And I think in doing something you find challenging, that is the heating element. It's the kind of going against the grain. It's not just going with your habits. So tapas is resisting looking at Facebook, or resisting having that extra cup of coffee, or not skipping a meal, skipping a meal here and there. Or, it's doing things which require a certain amount of discipline and not just succumbing to what you would like to do.
Okay.
Now, the important thing about tapas is that it should be done in such a way that it doesn't disturb your mind. If your tapas is going to send you crazy, it's too much. Do something gentle. Just do something gentle which you can deal with, and slowly increase that. So it's kind of it's asking you to address something about your lifestyle. One very simple tapas which works for me is to practice every day. I practice yoga every day, and I practice in the morning. I practice I chant and I practice my postures and breathing, and maybe spend an hour or an hour and a half, and that's really, really keeps me sane. I mean, I don't know whether it keeps me sane. It helps to cultivate sanity.
Right. So it's just doing a yoga asanas as a way of purifying. That could be
Yoga
one way.
asanas and some seated breathing and some meditation. So all those things, yeah. So it's a discipline, committing to a personal discipline. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, but it's doing something.
Hmm.
That's tapas. Swadhyaya is the second of the 3 practices. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's basically. Do you want me to spell it or not?
Swatiya. No, go ahead and tell. We'll look it up after.
Okay. Swadhyaya. It literally means self-study. Self-study. So that's one way of thinking about swadhyaya. There are various different ways, but you can think of, if tapas is the doing, you've got to do something. Swadhyaya means you've got to sit and be and reflect on how that's working for you.
Hmm.
So it's a kind of a self-inquiry. It involves listening and being still. You could think of it as a reflection. Another way of thinking about swadhyaya is studying. Anything that's going to take you inwards. Studying sacred literature or sacred texts is a way of thinking about swadhyaya. So you've got to do something, tapas. You've got to sit back and reflect and put what you're doing in a context. Like swadhyaya gives you a context, gives you, maybe you study something and you understand something a bit more. So swadhyaya links to practice, links to studying and reflecting.
Okay.
And then the third one, the last one, which is another long Sanskrit word, but it's a beautiful, beautiful idea, is Ishwara pranidhana. And Ishwara pranidhana, one of my teachers, Peter Hersnack, used to translate this rather loosely, I have to say, but very, very potently. Ishwara pranidhana, he said, trust in life, which I thought was beautiful. And and he said always trust in life with a capital L. So the idea is that Ishwara, which is sometimes translated as God, I mean, I think it's a bit of a problematic translation, but Ishwara is the greatest thing that you can conceive of. It could be, it's life with a capital L. It's life which animates us, which causes us to be, but it's much bigger than each one of us. And Ishwara pranidhana is something about trusting in the process of life. So tapas means you have to do something. You have to take responsibility to do something for your life. Swadhyaya is you have to take responsibility to reflect on how that's going and where it's taking you, and some honest self-inquiry. And then Ishwara pranidhana is the ability to say, okay, where it's taking me ultimately is not necessarily completely under my control. There are bigger forces than what I want. Greater forces.
Okay. All right. So let's actually map this to freedom. So I'm not feeling freedom. I'm trapped in my house. So maybe it's doing yoga, moving around in yoga, and finding the freedom within your body and using that to purify those kinds of thoughts of freedom, because you're always free, but maybe you're constricted at your home, or using oh gosh,
Swadhyaya.
whatever. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right.
Reflecting, doing some self inquiry, and maybe it's like reading some things about freedom and what true freedom means. Maybe it's freedom of self imposed limits. Maybe you're imposing some type of limits on yourself that make you not free. Maybe you're thinking that wearing a mask doesn't make you free. I'm not sure what it may be, but it reflect. And why is it that a mask doesn't make you free, right? What about wearing a mask truly doesn't make you free? Are you the same person with a mask or not? Whatever it is. I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
sure, right? I mean, but I think that those are kind of the freedoms in the United States that people are feeling constrained, that they have to wear a mask, that they can't see their friends. And so why isn't Zoom okay for you? What
Mm.
is it about touching and seeing your friends and hugging them? Like, what's the difference? And how can you feel that sense of wholeness and completion even when you can't hug your friends or see them
Yeah,
face
yeah.
to face, right? And that would be the second part. And then trust, instead of thinking, oh gosh, I'm free, I'm stuck in my house forever or another month. I don't know. Like in the United States, they're rolling out things in different phases. I may be in this phase for a while.
Mm.
Trust that there's something in here that is good for you, even though it feels like there's freedom. How
Mm.
can you be like a lot of prisoners, people who are literally in prison in the
Mm.
United States, and feel a
Mm.
sense of freedom? Why is it they feel freedom and you don't? You have a lot more freedoms in some ways. So that would be an example of, I think, of
Mm.
an example of taking this and mapping it to freedom or being a victim, right? These are all things related to being, I'm a victim, I don't have control. Well, what do you have control over your own mind? So try to do some yoga, do some stretches, open up your heart, whatever it is that needs to be
Mm.
purified. Maybe you're feeling anger at the state of the world and the people that
Mm.
are leading it. So if
Mm.
that's anger, then do some type of movements to purify that anger. And why are you angry? What is making you angry? Is it the freedom, like we talked about, or the injustice and unfairness? And
Mm.
maybe reflect, like, okay, am I fair all the time? If I'm not fair all the time and I'm not just all the time, then who am I to point fingers? It, so clean up your own act. Maybe that's something you can do on your own. And then trust, right? Trust that there's something greater that is driving us, and that maybe we're not supposed to be victims anymore. Maybe we're supposed to say something. I don't know.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.